So X-Men First Class is a unique one for me, and I think for us in general. Going all the way back to the origins of Friends from Work, you had kind of had this hot take that First Class isn't quite as good, in your opinion, as a lot of people think. Then I went back and rewatched it for this journey we were on, and I think that was the major takeaway. Whereas in X1 and X2, I kind of expected them to be early 2000s cheesy throwaway films. When I went back and watched them, it was like, whoa, these are actually really good and maybe better than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
First Class is the film that often gets held up as, wow, this was the new day for the X-Men, and this is the reboot, and this is what X-Men films should be like. And there are a lot of things in First Class that work and are really fun to watch, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I think our overarching takeaway was, man, this is not as good as I remember it being. In fact, I think I would have told you before rewatching it, it has like an 80% or something. And then I rewatched it and I'm like, this is like a 65 or a 68% movie. It's further down in our rankings than we thought ahead of time.
I think what's hard for me about this is when we're talking about the culture or the moment in which these movies release, this movie, it came out in 2011. And you kind of look at what's going on. You have the MCU building, but really at that point, I think if you asked anybody, one, if they even knew what you meant by the MCU, I would be surprised. But two, they would say, oh, Iron Man was great. And that would kind of be it, because the Avengers hadn't come out yet, which is really when I think we entered the next chapter of the superhero movies. And so this was like, I wonder if the reason it had the reputation it did is it was being compared against like movies like Iron Man 2 and The Incredible Hulk and Thor and Captain America, which are all like generally fine, but known as kind of like mid-tier Marvel movies. And it's like, I don't know. I think in that context, yeah, it's like, okay, it's fun because the visuals are better, right? Like we're not fully stuck back in the 2000s. You have more colorful costumes. You have better CGI.
Not always, though. That's what's weird. Is because of the use of practical effects in X2.
Yeah.
I remember thinking there's not much that looks poor here, but there were some weird montage-y type things that just kind of look cheesy.
Because they lean into the effects.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of
It's like when an 80s band figured out the synthesizer and they said, you know what? Instead of using this tastefully, let's make every song built around this synthesizer, and that's rock and roll.
Hey, I love Styx.
How about Jump? Dun, 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 dun,
and there's a song.
We have it. Print it. Cut the check.
There's something that I've seen Ryan Reynolds saying a lot on the Deadpool Wolverine press circuit that I think makes a lot of sense in general, but certainly when you're looking at superhero movies, where he said that he thinks the real, like the most dangerous thing that you can get creatively is too big of a budget and too much time. And I don't know what the budget was for First Class or how much time they had. But I mean, when I hear that, I think the spirit of it is if you are given the ability to be indulgent and there aren't pre-existing boundaries there, then there's danger that you're going to take these. We've talked about this in various contexts, but I think that X-Men First Class is a real example of you could pare a lot of stuff down. Like it's kind of one of those movies where I think if you had a good, strong editor and maybe like reimagined a few scenes just in terms of like the directing, I think it could go way up for me because there are some scenes that work super well.
Yeah. And on that note, we got to talk about the end of the film because I think the actual Cuban Missile Crisis stuff, Professor X getting shot, the way Michael Fassbender plays Magneto in this entire movie, but specifically how he drops what he's doing to come to Charles's aid. I mean, there's some really moving parts at the end of the movie. I've told you from day one that I always get moved about the I can't feel my legs thing.
Yeah.
And just because of what that means for the universe, the kind of almost Easter egg, like origin story of his paralysis. But then also in that moment, the betrayal from humans, the betrayal he feels a little bit from Eric.
Yeah.
I'm into the end of the film.
And that's kind of why we're watching it where we are here, if you're kind of going through in the release order. I think the X-Men timeline is famously confusing, but to me, I think what makes the most sense is is basically everything that happens before Days of Future Past, before the 70s, happens like in all timelines, like whether it's been reset or not reset. And so the way we're looking at this is the whole first chunk of this watch is all stuff that happens in the original timeline, and then things are going to ultimately be reset in Days of Future Past from the 70s moving forward, which is where we'll then kind of pick up with the new cast. So we're kind of flashing back here because this does wind up serving as an origin story for McKellen and Stewart's Magneto and Xavier that we get in the first trilogy. So this is kind of a nice like a look back at their relationship as we head into the third installment in that original trilogy. That's kind of the end of that relationship.
So go back and watch X-Men First Class and genuinely let us know what you think. Did you feel the same way as us when we watched it? Because again, we were kind of team First Class a little bit beforehand. At least I was, probably more than you. But it didn't quite meet my expectations. So we'd love to hear what you think. Our episode on X-Men First Class is available wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel right here on Friends from Work.